Hello class and welcome to our presentation, Introduction to Islam. So what is Islam? Well, a general definition is that Islam is a Near Eastern religion founded by the Prophet Muhammad in 7th century Arabia. So who is the Prophet Muhammad and what is the geographic region known as Arabia? So the Prophet Muhammad lived from 570 CE to 632 CE meaning Common Era. And the Prophet Muhammad is considered to be the primary or the most important prophet in what we might call the prophetic tradition of the book. That is, Islam does acknowledge the legitimacy of prophets that appear in the Bible, but the Prophet Muhammad is considered to be kind of like the final messenger of God. And the primary importance of the career of the Prophet Muhammad is evidenced in what is called the Shahada prayer. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Now, we will learn more about the life and the ministry of the Prophet Muhammad in a future lecture. So the religion of Islam originated with the Prophet Muhammad in the geographic region known as Arabia, as we can see on the map. And the Prophet Muhammad lived in what is modern-day Saudi Arabia. Now, when we study the life of the Prophet, there are two major cities that we have to be mindful of. The city of Mecca and the city of Medina, which during the time of the life of the Prophet was known as Yathrib or Yithrab. And the reason why these two cities are important is because it is within these two cities that the Prophet Muhammad had his two prophetic careers, which we will learn more about later. And the religion of Islam emphasizes three major beliefs for our purposes in this course. One, the belief that there is one God, Allah, and that Muhammad is his prophet. Two, total submission to the will of Allah. Indeed, the term Islam in Arabic means submission. And three, dedication to the Ummah, or the religious community of Muslims. Now, there are three major collections of sacred texts in the Islamic tradition: the Quran, the Hadith, and Sharia. So let us take a look at the most important sacred text, the Quran. So the Quran in Arabic literally means recitation, and it is a collection of sermons and teachings preached in poetic form by the Prophet Muhammad. And if you were to actually open up the Quran, you would notice that there are two different types of surahs or chapters, the Meccan surahs and the Medinian surahs. So what is meant by the Meccan and Medinian surahs? So the Meccan surahs refer to sermons delivered by the Prophet Muhammad between the ages of 40 and 50, from 611 to 621 CE. And the one thing about the Meccan surahs is that the message is overwhelmingly religious or spiritual in nature. That is, the Prophet preaches about the call to submit to the will of Allah, the concern for murawah or charity, the power and oneness of God, the discussion of the resurrection, the last judgment, and heaven and hell. And the reason why the message is so kind of religious or spiritual in nature is because at this point the Prophet Muhammad is kind of what you might refer to as like a street corner prophet in the city of Mecca. Then we have the Medinian surahs, which are sermons delivered by the Prophet Muhammad between the ages of 51 and 62, when he is the governor of Yathrib, or later to be known as Medina. And although the religious message is still consistent in the Medinian surahs, we also find that there are teachings regarding religious practice and law, such as teachings regarding prayer and purity practices, divorce, adultery, women, and inheritance. So although the Medinian surahs are more social and practical in nature, one could argue, they still stress the Meccan message of submission, the power and oneness of God, the last judgment, etc. So we have some understanding of the contents of the Quran. So what is meant by hadith? So hadith refers to short selections of the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad as testified by witnesses. So in other words, if you want to learn more about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, You would not really find it in the Quran. The Quran are more or less teachings and sermons. The Hadith is where you would find details regarding the Prophet's life. And then we have what is called Sharia, which is a vast collection of commentary and debates concerning Islamic law, as well as legal handbooks that were produced and adopted during the medieval period. That is, if you were to go to the library, you wouldn't find a giant book called Sharia. Rather, Sharia refers to kind of like the tradition of Islamic jurisprudence and kind of scriptural interpretation. So again, you would find various different kind of legal handbooks, teachings regarding like legal theory within the Islamic tradition that is as a whole referred to as Sharia. So that is our general overview of Islam. We learned kind of a general definition of this faith tradition, and we talked about the three major sacred texts. So now we're going to move on to a study of the life of the Prophet Muhammad.